My first point here is stop comparing yourself to other direct sales companies. Now, let that sink in for just a minute. Stop comparing yourself to other direct selling companies. That might sound counterintuitive, and probably to a certain degree it is. But, especially over the last year or so, what I have seen is a lot of great companies who are reading all the press and all the amazing stories of all the different companies that just took off during the pandemic. And they're sitting there and looking at their own situation, and that didn't happen for them. Maybe they only grew a little or they stalled out. A lot of companies were on a decline. And what I've seen, and it's heartbreaking, is they feel like, well, if I'm not growing like that, I must really be a failure. I must really be falling short. If I'm not seeing hockey stick growth like I keep reading about or like I keep seeing presentations about, then it's worse than I thought it was. We're really off here. And what I want to tell you is I've heard so much from these companies, and, they don't hear the stories of the companies like them. They don't know that they are probably more common in our industry than the others. And that doesn't, I think you're going to see it all over the board. So there's companies that are growing. There's companies that aren't growing. By the way, that you could probably say that just about any time in our history, right? And so what I want to encourage everyone, though, is because that's been so front and center, try to give yourself a little grace and know when and how you should be looking at other direct sales companies and what to do with that, okay? There are lots of companies who've struggled since 2020. All right. You're not alone if you found yourself in that place. So what I want to do, that doesn't mean you settle for it. But what I have seen is a lot of people lose hope that there's anything they could do about, because they think all the other companies are just taking off and they're the only ones that are really struggling right now. I'll also tell you, many companies that surged in 2020 have come back down to earth. And that's something too. Our industry is, the word I always use for it is volatile. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean it in kind of the way financial analysts look at the market. But if direct selling is an extremely volatile industry, the highs are very high and the lows can be very low. And as much as so many of us would love to just say, man, I would take 10% year over year growth every single year if I could get it. That sounds awesome and it's great. But our channel, our way of doing business leverages momentum like no other channel does. And so while that's amazing and there's all kinds of benefits that come from that, and I wouldn't trade it for anything, we also have to recognize we are, to a certain degree, a slave to momentum or the lack of momentum. And so part of us on the corporate side, part of our responsibility is to plan for it one way or the other. Okay. And so what that means is you need to define what success should look like for you. Now, all of you have heard that statement before, but it really is important. I've seen companies who, sit there and they have a great, awesome, profitable company at 15 million a year. And everything is great until they go see another company that's 50 million. And so they feel like, you know what, we're not successful. That's where we're supposed to be. What they don't know a lot of times is that company at 50 million is not profitable. And that company at 50 million is not enjoying the work that they're doing there. And so we have to define what does success look like for us. And I can promise you, if you can focus on that, then, things will come up, et cetera, et cetera. But, it will put everyone else and all the other companies in the right place in terms of your perspective. So we definitely need to learn from what other companies are doing, but I would say let's not compare, especially in an unhealthy way. Let's also make sure you understand that, hey, that tactic, that strategy worked for that company. That doesn't automatically mean it's going to work for me. Our industry is quite the industry of copycats. And sometimes in a bad way. So, a lot of times at the end of the day, direct sales companies, we are great at creating culture. And that, I think at the end of the day, that's what we share. And your culture is going to dictate what will work for you as a company. We've had companies this last year who have leaned in more into traditional party plan, believe it or not. And we've had tons of other companies that did that before that can't get it to work anymore. And so, there's shifting and pivoting and all of those words that we've used over the last couple of years. So you've got to first look at your context before you look at everyone else's context, because their context might not apply to you. Okay. The only other thing I would add here too is, especially in going back into this kind of, there are lots of companies that surged in 2020 and are coming back down to earth. Many of those companies, they felt like, gosh, we've got to keep up with this growth. And they also thought, well, man, if we're doing this now, it's only going to continue. And like I said, direct selling is a volatile channel. So it is the exception, not the rule, that when growth begins, that it continues. Okay. So I think the smart and wise thing for any executive to do is to say, okay, how do we leverage and catch the wind of growth now? But also, how do we make sure we don't, for example, hire up too fast or over-resource things, assuming that this growth is only going to continue? Because as much as we think we can make that happen, and maybe you can, all of the signs, if you look at our industry, will tell you, no, probably within 18 months, 2 years, 3 years max, you're definitely going to trail off. And then you'll go through another round and you'll go through another round. And that's really what our industry looks like. So anyway, that's the first one. And I camped out there a while because I know there are people listening right now that just hearing that alone gives you hope and gives you some strength for looking forward. So define what success looks like for you, learn from other companies, but don't compare. Make sense to you, Rich?
I really like that. Define what success looks like to you, because that helps me prioritize. That helps me, set strategy. And that's the lens everybody, I think, should be looking through.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point too. It kind of prompted a thought. If you're not the one defining what success looks like for your company, then who or what is? And a lot of times we're letting what other companies are doing and the half-baked stories we're hearing about what they're doing, that becomes how we define success. And it shouldn't, right?